Well, you'll be thrilled to know because I'm sure it's been very high on your list of things to do, list of priorities. You'll be very delighted to know that our national carrier, that's the Qantas airline, has a new look. I know, what a relief. You and I both have been losing sleep over this for a very long time. They have a lovely green colour scheme now that I'm sure just fixes everything because your priority, my priority with an airline is not things like, I don't know, running on time and not cancelling flights and getting your luggage to where it belongs. No, 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 forget all of that. It's got a pretty green tail on it, and that's what really matters. But there are some that might disagree with this lovely utopian, beautiful green view of the world that you and I share, and one of those people might in fact be the wonderful Senator Malcolm Roberts from One Nation. Senator, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you, Topher, and you're welcome. I've got a question for you. Is
Sure.
there anything in the news bulletin that says that airline stewards and stewardesses have got to wear Kermit the Frog costumes?
Well, look, honestly, for those that haven't seen it, this is the new look Qantas livery. And in that context, actually, that's not a bad idea. I mean, look, flights can be tedious at best. I've just gone to London and back for the launch of the ARC conference. And I've got to say, a couple of Kermit Frogged outfitted air hostesses or hosts would have really made my trip.
And is Santa Claus going to change to green costume? And what's it, Rudolph the Green-Nosed Reindeer?
Well,
Are we going? You know,
Well, I've heard for a long time that the airline industry is trying to go green. I didn't realise just how literally they actually meant it. I assumed it was about, carbon dioxide emissions and not putting so much plant food into the atmosphere. But obviously they were talking about the actual colour of the tail. Senator, all jokes aside, what does it say about our national carrier? Recently, as little as 10 years ago, this was one of the most valuable brands in Australia. Now they're rebranding in order to try and reinvent themselves. What happened in the last 10 years that they have to even consider such a thing?
well, they've gone woke. That is abundantly clear. But before we go any further, I must say that I'm still impressed with Qantas's people. The people in the planes, the pilots, the ground staff. They're wonderful people. They're very very switched on. I did notice a deterioration in service amongst a very small minority when during COVID with the masks and so on. Some became little Hitlers because I think that reflected the senior management. No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
Little
yeah,
Hitler is the best
yeah.
description. They became little Hitlers. That was driven, I think, by copying the corporate management.
Sure.
It's quite clear that I think what's gone wrong is that the corporate management have tried to become woke to appeal to who they think and the values that they think people aspire to in Australia when they've got it totally wrong. The other thing I think is that's emerging is that Alan Joyce, the former CEO, who had to retire early, resign early, he was rewarded apparently by short-term gains, short-term measurements of his performance. So he he basically ate out the heart of the airline to drop the costs, improve the profits, etc. And I'm not knocking the challenge around the COVID era brought along by the government's mismanagement and deceit
Sure.
around COVID,
Sure.
but notwithstanding that, he's still short-termed the airline. The Americans do it a lot, unfortunately. They get the figures looking great, the KPIs look good, and then they flog it off, or they reward their executives. So I think that's what's happened: a combination of being woke and misreading the Australian people, and a combination of short-term to maximize corporate bonuses.
Look, I'm going to be in furious agreement with you regarding Qantas's people. I remember some years ago, this is probably going back about 8 years, I spent some time flying other airlines, budget airlines, Tiger when it existed, and various other things. And then I had occasion to fly Qantas back to back on the back of a number of other flights with budget airlines. And I remember actually quite distinctly reflecting on how much better the service was, just at a personal level. That individual personal interaction that I had with Qantas staff was so much more positive than what I'd had with so many of these other airlines. So I'm not going to disagree with you there, but there is something to be said, don't you think? We're in a cost of living crisis. There's a lot of people experiencing supermarket trolley shock. They fill up the supermarket trolley, they get to the front of the supermarket.
What's the most expensive vehicle to run these days?
Forget
Supermarket trolley.
forget that V8 that you thought was going to cost you more than your house mortgage. That supermarket trolley is costing you a fortune. What does it say about the airline that Alan Joyce is gone. We have a new CEO running the company. They didn't just get down to business, but now they're spending time and trouble. I mean, what is this? Are they just trying to cover up the Yes 23 signs that they had painted on the back of the planes?
Yeah, I think we have to look deeper. I only found out recently because of one of the members of our team did some research on the ownership of Qantas, and it's got a significant ownership by BlackRock, Vanguard, and the other global fund managers. Okay,
Right.
now that tells you something. The second thing is that the government squashed the Qatar deal. They refused Qatar entry into the Australian market.
Yes.
Now you see what's going on. The Qantas corporate executives, in my opinion, have been chosen as the selected few, and they're protected. And Topher, whenever someone is protected, it's by government or government regulation. And whenever someone is protected, accountability just goes out the door. That's it, straight away. Accountability's gone. They know they don't have to. They're not accountable to customers because they've got so much to prop them up. They've got, and BlackRock, Vanguard, I'm guessing will have, and I'm pretty confident will have strong connections into the Australian government. They've got their fingers in Coles, Woolies, all
Of
four
course.
banks. In fact, I said that the banks are basically one bank. The four big banks are one bank with four different logos. So what I'm saying is it's part of a global behemoth, and there's no accountability, and that's what really drives it, the lack of accountability. And you can do whatever you want when you haven't got accountability. As we said in our discussion before coming on, they're completely out of step with the people of Australia.
Sure.
Completely out of step, and they're not taking any notice.
Sure. Well, look, if I can indulge myself for a moment as a bit of a Tolkien fan, this is J.R.R. Tolkien's reference to childless lords in high towers musing on heraldry. Here we have these senior executives in high-paid positions musing on colour schemes, and that's what they're concerned with when there's a cost of living crisis and an airline that has lost an enormous amount of its public goodwill over the last 10 years. Now, you mentioned BlackRock, you mentioned these investment firms. There is a part of me that sits here and says, now, and this sits very uncomfortably with me, to be clear, and I raise this because I know you're going to have a different position to what I do. I'm very much a free market purist, right? I believe that free markets, uninterfered with by the government, are the best
By the
possible.
way, I'll cut in there. So am I.
Okay.
But
You draw a bit of a line when it comes to international markets, though, do you not? To what degree should we be getting involved with things like BlackRock investing in our national carrier?
Well, Topher, as I said just a few minutes ago, every major monopoly has been created by government. Every major monopoly.
I agree with that.
If you look at the industrial relations legislation, for example, well, look at the banking legislation. It is so complex, so overwhelming that a small bank or a customer doesn't know what's going on. Don't dare take on Westpac,
No chance.
CBA, or
Yeah.
just don't take it. And if you do take them on, they dig down deep into the regulations, and they can keep you tied up for years.
Sure.
They can destroy your life just by operating through the regulations. Regulations are not meant to protect the people. They're meant to protect the corporations. The same applies to the Industrial Relations Club. The Fair Work Act is now 1,500 pages, and they're wanting to add another 250 pages, I think. Workers don't understand, and we haven't got time to go into it now, but the
Sure.
people who are abusing this are the people who are protected by the legislation. The Industrial Relations Club, the multinationals, the large union bosses, the powerful union bosses, bureaucrats, consultants, lawyers, HR practitioners, and consultants. These are the people. And meanwhile, small business and employees get shafted. So when you have a look around, you realize that large government has been co-opted. The government in America has been co-opted. We know that. The government controls the military, the largest and most powerful military force ever imaginable. And that's
Sure.
essentially controlled by the government, that's controlled by these major global funds.
Sure.
And so the globalists control things, and what they're after is control over us. And so that's why, I used to be very much a free marketer, but we don't have a free market because the government is no longer acting in support of the people.
Yeah, and that's where I find myself internally conflicted, I guess. I believe in free markets, but corporatism is different from capitalism, and unfortunately what we're seeing so much is corporatism, where the client is the government rather than the people. Look, if I may, I want to bring it back to the green plane. This is a faux indigenous design using dot art that isn't, from what I'm reading, and don't quote me with certainty on this, but I've had a look. As best as I can tell, this is not genuine indigenous art. Now, this is from an airline that backed the voice they lost. This is from an airline that has been woke on every single possible topic and had its butt kicked in so many different ways. They've had to replace their CEO because he just got too woke and went too far. And now under the new CEO, the first thing they've done is insult Indigenous Australians and insult Indigenous artists by using their kind of artwork, their dot-based artwork on their planes. What's the future for Qantas? How can they fix... What should they be doing? It's easy to say what they shouldn't. What should they be doing here?
Well, they should be, as you said, I can't say it any better than you just said it a little while ago. They've got to focus on customers and focus on maximum providing service that draws in customers. They've got to focus on what the customer needs. Customers have strong needs. You mentioned some of them. They vary from industry to industry, but in the airlines, it's on time, it's cost effectiveness, economy. It's value in all industries. It's value.
Sure.
And it's you arrive in the same place as your baggage with your baggage.
Yeah.
These basic things, and the big one is safety. And one of the things that I see, it's happening in the Australian Defence Forces, and I've been calling it out in the Senate for 6 or so years now, 7 years. They're becoming woke too, and so what happens when you become woke? You lose focus on the real drivers of the business, who the business is supposed to serve, and you start doing all the ancillary things. Sorry, not ancillary; they're needless things, and that distracts
Tertiary
people.
things.
And next thing, your culture's shot, and when your culture's shot, safety goes out the door. Safety just gets smashed. So I'm really worried about the safety effects of this, because I've seen companies, I've seen industries lose it on safety because they lost their culture. They lose when culture is the most powerful driver of behavior and profits and efficiency there is. Everyone knows that. 40 years ago it might have been new and only some of us knew it, but everyone knows that these days.
Sure.
And they're destroying their culture. The Australian Defence Force is destroying its culture, which is our major strategic weapon, is our mateship and camaraderie and support within our ranks. So that's what I'm worried about. The risk will shoot up enormously, and who knows what will happen with a plane in the air.
Well, to my knowledge, Qantas 10 years ago was one of the only major airlines in the world that had not had a single fatality, that, if I recall correctly. I'm actually not sure if that's still the case now, 10 years on. It's not one of those things that I keep up to date with on a day-by-day basis. But to my knowledge, they maintain that record. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that continue. 10 years ago, Qantas was a brand and a national carrier that we Australians could be proud of, and I would certainly love to see that continue. You've rightly pointed out the people are still there.
If I could jump in, I've heard some pilots tell me that it used to be that when they arrived at the terminal, straight to the plane. Now it's like, I'm not saying this is many pilots. I'm just saying that some pilots have told me that the staff are starting to go, okay, I'll just stroll in there whenever I want, sort of thing.
Yeah, wow.
And that just shows a loss of pride and loss of wanting to identify with a successful organization, because they're not proud of Alan Joyce. They're not proud of their corporate management, and the same in the Defence Forces. They're not proud of the Chief of Defence Forces. They're not proud of the senior leadership.
Well, Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you so much for your time. Let's hope that our national carrier and indeed our Defence Force can get back to basics, get that right, and build from there. Thank you so much for your time here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you very much, Topher. Keep doing what you're doing. We need independent, free media.
Thank you.